Uh, Anne Lamott is a newlywed, basically. Let's start off by saying that. She had never been married until a couple of years ago, and she married at the age of 65. So if that was ever a dream of any of you, not that it should be, not that it has to be, but if you ever wanted to get married and kind of waited, there's always hope. Annie Lamott's a great example. Annie Lamott is probably one of the most impressive and impactful Christian prognosticators and opinion makers with regard to progressive faith that we've seen in the last 30 to 35 years. She is a novelist, but she's most famous for her nonfiction works. Obviously, born in -- in San Francisco area, grows up in Tiburon. I don't know if I'm saying this right, or Tiburon. There may be a Tiburon in the Bay Area of California. She will play competitive tennis. Her father and mother are non-religious. She doesn't grow up in a religious household. She graduates from a pretty preppy, prestigious preparatory school and goes off to college on a tennis scholarship and plays and is enrolled, not that she studies that much, at Goucher College in Maryland for 1 year. She quits and moves back to the Bay Area and begins writing for magazines. You can go to the timeline now, which I'm going to use, but I'm going to elaborate, Brent, on the next one just to see this timeline. And I've not done timelines for other of the great souls, but I think it's interesting to see encapsulated on one page some highlights of somebody's life and see the impact that they can have. She'll write for Mademoiselle, Women's Sports, California. Her father's death from brain cancer will have a huge impact on her. She will publish her first novel, Hard Laughter, and later on in the presentation today, we'll see both where you can look at her novels and see which ones that you either have or would like to dive into, and her nonfiction work too. From pretty early on, she becomes an addict. She's addicted to alcohol and also marijuana and a little bit of cocaine. She has a hilarious description of falling off the wagon, as they call it. And my friend Sally Obermeyer would say, "Oh, Bob, don't ever say that. Say that they slipped from grace." Sally was a recovering alcoholic, and she hated that thing about falling off the wagon. So she slipped from grace continuously. Continuously. She has a hilarious description of this in operating instructions, where she will go and get a 6-pack of beer, just one 6-pack. And she says, "I'll just have one beer." And then she goes, "Well, one didn't hurt. 2 might be okay." And so she has 2. And before too long, she's down the entire 6-pack, and she goes, "Well, while I'm at it, I might as well just pick up the Irish whiskey," which she does. And she will jump in and out of relationships. She will eventually have 2 abortions. She's involved in politics, but her life is kind of coming apart at the seams. In 1984, she starts hanging around St. Andrew Presbyterian Church. Let me do a little excursus here. I first ran across Annie Lamott in the Whistler's bookstore in Westport. I love to read books about writing, and I picked up this book called Bird by Bird. A friend of mine had recommended that I might find it interesting. I looked at it and looked at the dedication page, and it said, "Again, I must say my thanks to St. Andrew Presbyterian Church, for without them, I do not think I'd be alive," or something to that effect. That's not exactly what you said, but I said, this person and the writing was great. I mean, she is a great instructor, good teacher, and the writing was clear, crisp, wonderful. And she thanks her church. You don't see that all the time. But the one word that stuck out for me, again, I must say. Well, where did she say that before? Well, apparently she said it in the previous book, which was Operating Instructions, which came out in 93. Then I would go and learn all about how she was a drunk, an addict, addicted to drugs, but that she began to get sober after hanging around the door at St. Andrew Presbyterian Church, which was near this flea market that she frequented. She began to get sober, not completely, but then she got sober. And she also had a conversion experience. I think she lived in the bay in a marina on a houseboat. And at one point, and this is where she describes Jesus as the alley cat of heaven, not the hound of heaven, as Thompson said, bounding after us, trying to get us before we, fall to the clutches of sin, but sneaks around. Jesus kind of sneaks around. And she went to her houseboat and she sensed that Jesus was in where she was living. And she doesn't describe this, but her exclamation and her vulgarity, some people would just say it's expressive. She says, okay. And she says, ah, and then she uses an expletive before the word it. Okay. Ah, it. All right, I give in. Come on in. And meaning to Jesus, come on into her life. She will be baptized in St. Andrew Presbyterian Church. And then she gets pregnant again. And this is because she was sleeping around and she didn't use proper protection. And she decides, though, that she will have this baby. And that is her son Sam. About the same time, her best friend Pammy contracts cancer and eventually will die in 1990. It is from Pammy that she comes up with one of the best descriptions of cancer and of death, but cancer, death by cancer. She calls that the big eraser, and how the big eraser came and just wiped Pammy away. In her nonfiction writing, you soon begin to discover that she lives through her writing a very public life. She will be expressive. She will be disclosive. She'll be revelatory about all kinds of things through her writing about her life. And so she processes her grief. She goes through her sorrow on paper, basically. She will teach in a number of colleges in the 1990s, and then Operating Instructions hits the bookstores and it becomes a bestseller. Then later, it's not on the timeline, but Bird by Bird will become a bestseller. And that's where I kind of met her in person. She came to do a workshop for Hallmark Cards, and she had a reading and a book signing of Bird by Bird at the Brookside bookstore that Steve Paul used to own and run. This kind of old school and inside baseball for you Kansas Cityans. People outside may not care nor know nor give a hoot about this, but this is a wonderful bookstore. And there was about 20 people that went to the signing at this bookstore. That's where she was in her career at these readings. The people at Hallmark Cards didn't know who she was either, but they brought her in to kind of instruct and inspire people about writing. And also she was on a promotional tour for Bird by Bird. in the middle of this bookstore in like it was July, the power went out in all of Brookside, including the air conditioner in the bookstore. So we got to stand on the sidewalk and converse and talk. And at that time, I told her that a Sunday school class at Community was looking at all of her writings on Salon, and we had made our own book, or I had made it, and we confessed, we stole the writings off of the Salon website. We pasted them in and printed up books for everybody. I showed her one, and I said, we promise to buy whatever you publish out of these writings. And that book, which was published eventually, was called Traveling Mercies. And the entire class bought multiple copies of Traveling Mercies, just as we promised, and then showed up for her reading, which she did at Community Christian Church. And that was the first of about 4 trips that she came to Kansas City. One of the trips that she did was in right before 2001. I think it was in 2000. And she traveled always with a prayer partner, and she poked her head out of the curtains and was looking for her prayer partner in the sanctuary, couldn't find her, and everybody clapped. You know, it was a big crowd. Oh, yeah. And then she goes, oh, no, shut up. No, it's not time yet. She can be rather surly. She's real thin-skinned sometimes. And she says she was looking for her prayer partner. Anyway, later on, she also revealed her crustiness when she talked about her mother dealing with Alzheimer's. And she said out loud to the whole group, no mother is better than having a mother with Alzheimer's. Whoa, okay, let's make it all about you. All right. So that struck one of our elderly members of our class as really insensitive. And Annie Lamott would confess that she could be kind of self-centered and a control freak, as she's frequently self-criticized herself as that, and a little bit way too crusty. She's been very politically involved, and in 2008 worked on the Obama campaign real heartily. In 2009, some 20 years after her son was born, her first grandson is born, and that's Jax. And she and Sam will write a book about all of that. One of the more powerful or popular books, in addition to the earlier nonfiction works, is Help, Thanks, Wow. And these are 3 essential approaches to prayer. We'll talk about that a little bit later on. And then she came out with these other books, Small Victories, Hallelujah Anyway. And then she got married in her hometown there in Fairfax, California, right after she turned 65. So next slide. Oh, one other thing that she did, and these are pictures of her. This is on the left. These are earlier pictures. And I've tried to pick pictures that kind of show her in her essence. The picture in the middle where she, with the white background and the multicolored dreads, that's her at, I think, her political fiercest. The picture next to that to the left, where she's holding her hands together and she's kind of looking up and she's sitting down, this is her plaintive kind of attitude, where she's really trying to beseech people to hear what she might be saying. The picture down at the bottom left is when she made one of her visits to Community Christian Church. She gave a great description, by the way, of the steeple of light that we are privileged to share with the city at Community Christian Church. It's an extraordinary piece of sculpture by Dale Eldred. It's sculpture with light. And it came on right after she made her presentation, and she was walking out. She looked up at it and she goes, a a delicatessen for birds because she saw the bugs flying through the light. This is the nimbleness of her imagination and her metaphorical capacities. She can just weave a story in just telling. She's a great storyteller herself. On the upper level of pictures is a picture of Sam grown up, and then a picture of her grandson, Jax, and Sam and his partner. Like mother, like son. They're not married. But they're partnered and very, very committed. The picture in the upper right is a picture of her in her desk where she writes. I thought you'd like to see maybe a little bit about what her working space looks like. She calls it a little bitty closet. Apparently that's it. There's a little bit more to the, in front of her looking at this, but that's about it. And then the two pictures in the lower right, one is the wedding party before they go out. That's the bridesmaids. And then the other one is of Neil Allen, her husband of 2 years now. And that is on their wedding day. I think the next slide is where to start. I would start with her nonfiction. I'm not putting this in chronological order. The first two books are in the order in which I encountered her. Bird by Bird, then Operating Instructions, then came Traveling Mercies, then came Plan B, which, by the way, is a kind of whiny book. If there's any criticism that can be leveled at Annie Lamott is that sometimes the perdurance that she expresses with regard to her eating disorders and her need to control gets a little whiny. And in this book, this is during the Bush years, and Plan B, the Plan A was that Gore would get elected president, so that didn't happen. So Plan B was kicked in. It's a little whiny. In Grace Eventually, not only the book covers, but the book's substance comes back to really the thoughts on faith, peace. She is continuing to write for Salon. She continues to write really cogently about faith. And those three, Traveling Mercies, Plan B, and Grace Eventually, are kind of the hallmark of her spirituality. More so Traveling Mercies and Grace Eventually. But she continues on. She does a book with her son, and that's Some Assembly Required. And then she does these 3 books, Help, Thanks, Wow, Stitches, Small Victories. And then she does 3 more books with another publisher, Hallelujah Anyway, Almost Everything, and Dusk, Night, Dawn. I like Dusk, Night, Dawn a lot. And I like Help, Thanks, Wow a lot. I had the other books, I read them, but they're not as substantive as Traveling Mercies and Grace Eventually. But Dusk, Night, Dawn is very good. Next slide. These are the novels, and my wife has read all of these. She started out as a novelist, and I think that she would like to think of herself as a novelist. But she's different than, say, C.S. Lewis was, or even Frederick Buechner. They were true novelists. I mean, they wrote profoundly important novelistic books, novels. The Chronicles of Narnia are going to stand up for a long time. Godric and Brendan are going to stand up for a long time for Frederick Buechner, even though they may be more popular because of their religious nonfiction than anything else. I'm not in a position to say if her novels are going to stand up over time. I like Crooked Little Heart, and I like Imperfect Birds. I read a little bit of Hard Laughter. but I've never read Rosie or Joe Jones or All New People. But those are chronologically how she published them. And I would recommend that you check those out at some point. Brent, if we could watch a little bit, this will take about 10 minutes, but it's really a wonderful interview that she does on the Today Show. And she just did it this past March. She's got some really funny things to say about enduring the pandemic with her husband, because she gets married in April of 19, and then the following spring in 20, boom, the pandemic shuts everything down. So she has a line, I hope we'll be able to hear it, about how she wondered, the stress was such that if she wondered how a Protestant would go about the annulment task of her marriage.
Lamott has taken readers on an honest and often really humorous journey through her life. She shares her battles with addiction and her struggles as a single mom, and also finding her place in Christianity.
Yeah, a few days before her 61st birthday, Anne wrote the 12 truths on what she's learned from life and shared them in her TED Talk, which has more than 6 million views. Take a look.
Life is both a precious, unfathomably beautiful gift, and it's impossible here on the incarnational side of things. It's been a very bad match for those of us who were born extremely sensitive. It's filled simultaneously with heartbreaking sweetness and beauty, desperate poverty, floods and babies and acne and Mozart, all swirled together. I don't think it's an ideal system. Number 2, almost everything will work again if you unplug it for a few minutes, including you.
Oh, boom, boom, boom. Anne's new book is called Dusk, Night, Dawn, on revival and courage. Hey, Anne, first of all, we love you. And secondly, we have been talking about your TED Talk, and I don't know why it kind of rose up again, and it's been out there for a while, but I sent it to Jenna, and Jenna
sent it to everybody.
Sent it to everybody. Do those 12 truths still hold true today for you, Anne?
I think so. I think truth is truth, and that life can be a bit too lifey some days, and some days are just too long. And we've been in COVID college for a year, and we didn't quite know what to make of it all. And so these truths are that you start where you are, you do the best you can, you get to make lots of mistakes and messes, and you probably will be saved one day at a time by the companionship of your very, very best friend.
Oh, so nice. I wonder, have you learned any other truths through this last year? As you said, we're in COVID college. What have you learned during this year of collective grieving?
Well, I want to say that I got married 2 years ago, 3 days after I got Medicare. And I didn't know that 1 year was going to be spent in quarantine with my husband, who I just adore and who is brilliant and kind and lovely. But, in quarantine, suddenly you hear him chewing bacon and you just are furious or bitter that you're not a Catholic, so you can get an immediate annulment tomorrow right after lunch. But what I think people learned in COVID college was we were forced to become a lot more contemplative. We couldn't race around like, ever-ready bunnies getting as much so-called important stuff done every day. We were, I think, shown deeper and deeper wells of compassion in ourselves because so many people were doing so much worse than we were. And you saw the lines of 3 and 4 miles long at food pantries, people just trying to feed their children, and your heart was stirred. People, or in Texas a few months ago when the terrible freeze happened, you saw the whole world reach out to Texas with blankets and water and money, money and food, and people stopped trying to figure it out in COVID college because you don't have to figure out your position on the Red Cross. You just send the money to take care of hungry children and old people who couldn't keep warm. So that was a blessing. And we had to recreate a new ordinary because our old ordinary lives didn't work since we couldn't go anywhere. And I say, hooray for ordinary life. This is where I see God every day in the daffodils outside my window that I might not have noticed. I mean, here they are with their funny orange and yellow clown frills on and their big noses, and each one of them makes me laugh. They're little sight gags. So I think we became more compassionate and more attentive. And those are huge blessings.
I think, by the way, I just want to sit in that for a
Yes.
minute. Some people want to help. I mean, you may have a friend who's on your heart or on your mind or someone who's going through trouble. And I know you have an interesting technique or something that you do, and it involves these little matchboxes around your house where you keep them kind of front of mind.
I do. I keep little boxes, or I make little altars around the house since I can't get to my church, which is basically my gas station where I fill up once a week. I couldn't get to my recovery meetings except by Zoom, which I love. It's like a little advent calendar of faces. But so I made little holy places around the house. Now, Neil is sort of a Hindu Buddhist type, and I'm a nice Sunday school teacher. So he might put up the Buddha or some Hindu god, and I immediately arrive with a Jesus thing. So we're sort of duking it out constantly. But you'll see little boxes. And I also use little boxes for God boxes because I have tiny, tiny control issues. I'm sure you are both fine.
Yes.
And don't try to fix and save and rescue your kids and parents. But I struggle, and so I'll write tiny notes to God, and I'll say, here, I've run out of any more good ideas, which is where grace begins. And I write person's name or a situation down, and I fold it up into a tiny bit of paper, and I put it in the little matchbox, and I say, I'm going to keep my sticky fingers off the controls of this spaceship till I hear back from you. And 100% of the time I do. I'll get this kind of Holy Spirit nudge on my shoulder, and I'll realize what the solution to my problem is.
Well, Annie, we
Don't
love
go
having
anywhere.
you. We're gonna
Yes,
come back?
do not
oh,
go
good.
anywhere.
And don't leave. We want to talk about your manicure and more. But first, we'll take a commercial break. We'll be right back. Oh my God. Is that amazing? How happy are we? We're back with best-selling author Annie Lamott. She's got a new book out, and they're all bestsellers. So this one will be too, if it isn't already. Dusk, Night, Dawn, on Revival and Courage. And before the break, we mentioned your fingernails. We got to take a peek. What you got cooking?
Well, oh my God, they go with what Jen is wearing.
I know, we match.
But, yeah, you know, I believe that I live by grace. Grace is spiritual WD-40. And it's like all three of us were little girls once, you two more recently. And people always handed you tiny, like necklaces of tiny chains that had gotten knotted, right? And so you work them. You don't tug them. You jiggle them. You work with them a little bit. And that's what grace is like. Grace is a spiritual WD-40. And it means that you become willing to have life or a friend push that little thin red straw into the nozzle and spritz and unknot the gold chain of your thinking. You know, it's so incredible. How do you meet grace? Grace meets you exactly where you are. And then it doesn't leave you where it found you, but you have to cooperate with it. So I get my nails done as a spiritual act. And so I went, and I slammed my finger in the door of the car about 3 months ago. So I have I'll put it up here.
Yes.
I have a bruise still growing out. And so, but my husband points out that it looks like the sitting Buddha underneath the pink glitter. But I got pink glitter for you two. And I also learned how to work FaceTime.
Wow.
And which like greater love has no woman than to learn how to work a new app. I can hardly work the toaster.
And, you know, we were talking a little bit earlier about people hurting. You were talking about Texas. There's been multiple shootings. People are tired. So what do you do with grief? I mean, it sounds like you meet it with grace, but what if for any of us that are feeling like they're grieving, what should we do?
Well, the two best things besides prayer are crying and laughter. Laughter, it means that you get together with your best friend or your husband or your child, and you talk about it, and you talk about how you just are ready to give up. It could be about global warming, or it could be what's happening at your dining room table, and you're afraid that you're losing your teenager to the dark path, and you talk about it with other people. You don't turn to your mind. You don't figure it out. Your mind is like, for me, I'm sure you two are fine, it's like a pinball machine, sometimes, and it's for entertainment purposes only. But when you share something with a friend, you eventually somehow start laughing. Laughter is carbonated holiness. And if you're laughing with somebody, you're basically in church. Trevor Noah said, if you're laughing with someone, you're sharing something. So your grief is suddenly divided by two people. And the crying is the other best thing. Most of us were taught, when I came up in the 50s, and if you were crying at the table or angry, you got sent to your room without eating. So coincidentally, some of us developed tiny eating disorders. But crying, there is no shame in it. It is the way home for me. It baptizes you, it cleanses you, it moisturizes you, and it waters the new seeds at your feet. You don't even know what they are. The earth, and the title is Dusk, Night, Dawn, and I think that we have been coming through one of the darkest nights in American history, and I think the dawn is breaking, but we don't know what seeds are at our feet right now, and crying waters them. So cry and laugh, and always, always, always take care of the poor.
Wow. I think you made us better everything.
And thank you so much. And don't forget, you may have to be officiating my wedding. Remember.
I want to officiate your wedding so much.
Will you do it?
I begged her to. I showed her the dress I will wear, and I told her if she doesn't let me officiate, I'm going to come and wreck it for everybody.
A wedding crasher. Oh, Anne.
Yes. Thank you.
Can't wait for that. To check out Anne's book, which everybody should. Go to today.com/shop.
I'm going to lift up kind of 5 central themes, I think, in Annie Lamott's spirituality or her faith. Number 1 is grace really can be found in eclectic, humor-laced, congregationally based, unflinchingly incarnational Christianity. That quotation mark shouldn't be there. That's all my words. None of this is her. That's my description of what she embodies. She's quick with wonderful, as you heard in that clip from the Today Show, with wonderful, memorable descriptions of things. I've already mentioned Jesus as the alley cat of heaven. She mentioned this thing about God's inbox. She's kind of changed it a little bit. She used to say, get a little box and and I've tried it, by the way. Here's mine. This is I don't know what it is. It's some kind of male version of a jewelry box. It's got a golf thing on top of it. And inside here, I put my insoluble problems. So for example, this is about my very first one regarding my nephew, Christopher, who has cystic fibrosis. I can give money to research. I can pray is on you. Get busy. Then another one. Christopher's life expectancy is now 18. Not good enough. And then this is another one. Christopher is 22 now, graduated from Virginia Tech. Yes, but his life expectancy is only 38. Improving, but definitely not there, God. Come on. Then another one I have, he graduated from grad school. Anyway, so these are things about which we can do nothing when we're powerless. And I put them in my inbox, and that relieves me from the fantasy and the delusion that I'm in control, but also in terms of supplication, gives me an avenue for channeling that energy, that concern, that care. She warns us also about the attractiveness of grace light. She portrays death, as I've already said, as the big eraser. And she frequently turns to St. Andrew Presbyterian Church, where she is both a Sunday school teacher and leads in Vacation Bible School, and does something that we all should do. And I don't say this as a clergy person, but she continuously honors her pastor. Doesn't honor the pastor by doing put down humor, which apparently is one of the biggest tropes for Disciples of Christ members. That's how we show we love our minister, by putting them down. Oh, I'm just joshing. Don't you know I'm showing you I love you. Well, she doesn't do that. She honors her pastor, quotes her effusively. And that pastor is no better than the pastor you have, no better than the pastor that many a Protestant congregation possesses. Any rate, grace can be found in eclectic, humor-laced, congregationally based, unflinchingly incarnational Christianity. Next slide. Forgiveness is the key. Now, this is kind of partially rooted not only in what she's learned in reading the Bible, in teaching Sunday school, in her own experience, but especially as, let's use this phrase, as a friend of Bill. That's a metaphor for somebody who's a 12-stepper, somebody who's in AA, and Bill being the founder of AA. And that's usually, by the way, people identify without outing somebody who's an alcoholic in recovery. I heard about this. I've never had to do this, but I've heard about it happening in a church where somebody, the pastor went out to the congregation before the Christmas Eve service began and said, for those of you who are going to understand what I'm about to say, great. For those of you who don't know what it means, that's okay too. I'll tell you later. I'd just like to know if there are any friends of Bill in the congregation. I need to see you in my office right now. And somebody who was in AA got up and went to meet with the pastor. There was a person who was suicidal and had kind of slipped from the hand of grace, and needed somebody to talk to. Anyway, forgiveness is rooted deeply in her being a member of AA. Her forgiveness school, it begins with forgiving yourself, then you might as well start at the dinner table. She also says, if we can forgive our families in all of their weirdness and craziness, we can learn to forgive anyone, including ourselves. And she has this very famous quote about not forgiving, being like drinking rat poison and then waiting for the rat to die. Next slide. She will talk about perfectionism again and again and again. It's certainly a fracture in the American character. We're perfectionistic, and she comes out real strong against this. Perfectionism is the voice of the oppressor, the enemy of the people. It will keep you cramped and insane. And she thinks it's based on an obsessive belief that if you do everything just right and you hit every stepping stone just right, you'll have to die. And the truth is, we will all die anyway. And a lot of people who aren't even looking at their feet are going to do a whole lot better than any of us and have a lot more fun while they're doing it. So she, again, perfectionism is at the root of many an addictive problem. Remember in the Serenity Prayer, the very first part of that prayer is, God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, all the imperfections in myself and other people. And perfectionism, to Annie Lamott, is tantamount to death. Next slide. This is not in anything that she has written. This is more my extrapolation of her faith and what I call her preferences, and these are 10. She's local rather than general. She believes in simple faithfulness rather than dogmatic certainty. She traffics in stories rather than theories. She holds on to grace rather than judgment. She is illuminated by God's immanence rather than God's transcendence. She, remember that reference to the daffodils outside her window. She prefers sentiment rather than cynicism. She abides in community rather than by individualism. She is a proponent of inclusion rather than condescension. She holds to providence rather than randomness. She really does, and this is big. And I've left the last three as kind of as Aristotle would call it, in stress. These last three are the biggest ones: providence rather than randomness, the mystical rather than the rational, and forgiveness rather than perfectionism. But I thought you'd like to see in the next slide the 12 truths she's learned from life and writing. The audio, the video clip that we just saw from the Today Show is just mention a couple of them. But she also, there's 4 themes basically in all of these 12 deals: families, food, grace, and death. Almost all of these relate, these 12 relate to this. All truth is paradox. Almost everything will work out again. This is what she says: if you unplug it for a few minutes, and you know that about a computer for sure. And then she says also, including yourself. Nothing outside of you will help you in any real lasting way. The only thing that's nothing, no thing. She doesn't view God as a thing, but God is outside of us, but also inside of us as well. Everyone is screwed up, broken, clingy, and scared. Chocolate with 75% cacao is not actually
Hey, Bob, you're freezing up on us.
that scary. And death is incredibly hard to bear, and you don't ever get over losing people you love. Let me say something about this is life and writing. Elsewhere, and this is in Bird by Bird, and she's shared it in her presentations. You need 2 things as a writer. And she says, give up hopes of making money as a writer. You don't write to make money as a writer. You write because you must write, because you're on a quest to learn something, because maybe by writing you'll understand it better. But she says you need 2 things. You need a ballpoint pen so that when you're walking outdoors or taking a hike, you can have something to write on your hand. A pencil won't do, and a fountain pen is too messy. A ballpoint pen is what you need. And secondly, you need a really good chair, because you're going to put your butt in that chair again and again and again, and it's just hard work. So you better be fairly comfortable, but to work. Secondly, I would say this: without Molly Ivins, without Irma Bonbeck, at least we have Annie Lamott to give us comfort and to prompt us and to irritate us to pay attention to life as we want to live it and as we all would prefer to live it. So these are more philosophical. But if you want to know about the writing piece, the specifically focused on writing portions, look at Bird by Bird. And by the way, it's used in college courses on creative writing left and right, all over the place. So next slide. I make some suggestions for use. I'm assuming that Brent can make this slide deck available for you all and send it to you if you want. I suggest, in terms of praying after Annie Lamott's example, the first suggestion is ask yourself these three questions. For which portions of your life is the prayer of petition, help, appropriate? For which portions of your life is the prayer of gratitude, thanks, appropriate? And for which portions of your life is the prayer of awe, wow, appropriate? By the way, she's a good popularizer of things that she hears from the pulpit. She gives her minister credit usually the first time she cites it. By about the third time, it's hers. And the wow part has been added to a popular trope that there are basically two kinds of prayer, help and thanks. But I think appropriately, she's added the wow piece. And then the suggestion, too, is to take the 10 things that I think that she focuses on in her overall spirituality and writing, and infuse your prayers with thoughts and meditations about the local, faithfulness, stories, grace, God's immanence, sentiment, community, inclusion, providence, the mystical, and forgiveness. The third one is to really try it yourself about God's inbox. You don't have to have a funky kind of male jewelry box with a golf green on it. You don't have to have that, but you could have your own box to put in it a pesky theological question, a continuously messy relationship, a seemingly incurable disease. That's the one I put in there, a cantankerous family conflict, etc. And experience it then as a release from worry, relinquishment from anxiety, and trust in God's provision. And with that, next slide. These are resources. The On Resilience with Anne Lamott is over an hour long. It's really wonderful. It's an interview done by Strengthening the Heartland. It's pretty new. Bird by Bird with Annie Lamott is a documentary by Frida Lee Mock, and it's about 50 minutes long. You saw the Today Show piece. The TED Talk is about 12, 15 minutes long, and it's got those 12 truths, and she elaborates on them. It's very humorous, very interesting. And if you want to read about her wedding, it's a long article complete with a lot of pictures in the New York Times. She gave them access. You know, as I said, she lives a very public life. It's a long piece in the New York Times from April 26, 2019. And I've given you the link to it there.
I have a comment, Bob. You talked earlier about her being sort of crusty. I guess, is it coming across as being crusty because she's perhaps a female?
No. She was crusty back in that moment when her mother was under stress with Alzheimer's. And she, by the way, she does not do, this was at a book reading and behind the scenes. She doesn't come off crusty in that Today Show at all.
No,
No, not at all. But back then she did. She doesn't travel well, and she'll tell you that she does not like the travel. She does it, to promote the book. That's how she makes a living. She's now not just trying to provide for her son, but saving up for her grandson, Jax, to send him to college or whatever. And she's got obligations and such. She supports many causes, but she does not travel well. And she would tell you that she's short-tempered and cross when she goes on the road. But no, I don't think she abides. She's not crusty normally. No.
Okay. Because that was certainly not the impression I got of her with the videos that we saw. So.
Oh no, she's real sweet there. But I was just telling you, showing you, trying to reveal, the real. She would do this. She would tell you, you don't want to see me. She says in, I think it's operating instruction. She said, "I am the Saddam Hussein of jealousy."
Oh my gosh.
She will critique herself as very, in all honesty, she said it real sweetly. She says, I have tiny little control issues. No, they're not tiny. They're huge. They're gargantuan. But she makes light of it with good humor. I think as a grandmother and in her maturity and having endured some time, she is mellower, yes, but she was not mellow about George Bush, and she was not mellow about Donald Trump. She was very irritated, to say the least, and worried. As she said in that Today Show, we've come through one of the darkest times in American history.
Well, and it sounds like, she says it like it is, but as you also said earlier, the way her mind thinks, we were just amazed as I was looking around the table here, listening to her talk, at the way she describes things so quickly with her mind in ways that make you sit back and think about it again. Yeah.
Very quick, very quick.
Like the big eraser.
Yeah.
Who would
And
think
She has a nimble metaphorical imagination.
Yes, she
Just
does.
extraordinarily nimble.
I'll never look at a daffodil the same.
that's what I was going to say. The description of the daffodils, it's like, whoa, I have to go look at them again.
Well, and I never look at the steeple of light without saying, oh, it's a delicatessen for birds.
Birds,
If you- The steeple of light are these beams that go miles high, and the insects come in there and populate it because they're attracted like moths to a flame. And the birds dive bomb right through there because it's dinner time.
And so do the
I've
bats.
never seen that ever.
Yeah.
So she's helped many people learn how to pray and approach Christian faith from a new perspective. You must understand her context too. The Bay Area is a hotbed of megachurch fundamentalism on the one hand, but also wholesale non-religious disdain for the hypocrisy that the church has expressed again and again and again. And where she errs on the side of is always, and she said this in the Today Show interview, she errs on the side of compassion for the poor, always. And any church that doesn't do that normally might want to question its worthiness to have the name church attached to it. So